Tucker Carlson has said some incredibly offensive stuff over the years. So they go, and he used the F word on Easter morning when my kids were off looking for eggs by Cadbury, and he uses the F word? What are we doing? What is up, everyone? It's Chewburger84 here with another episode of One Nerd, All Things, and this one is for the political nerds out there. We're going to be covering a bit of a review of the debate between Dave Smith, comedian, former MAGA guy from the US, versus Ben Ferguson, who is kind of a mouthpiece for the White House MAGA movement, always seems to be very defensive of that side of it. Was supposed to be originally a debate between Dave Smith and Adam Solznick as a bit of a rematch. Either way, this is kind of a rematch as well, but it covers a lot of the topics, I guess, that I've been talking about a lot recently in terms of the Iran conflict. So I'm really excited to see how these guys go. But first of all, a big thank you. I now have 21 YouTube subscribers, so thank you very much for all 21 of you. I really appreciate your time. Thanks very much as well to the people who have been commenting and interacting on the last couple of videos. It's great to kind of get a little bit of back and forth going, so thank you to you guys. Please feel free to comment, like, subscribe. Find me everywhere at Chewburger84. But let me earn it first. Let me entertain you, ladies and gentlemen. So a little bit of a different style here today, rather than me just talk at the camera after I've watched content, after I've formed my thoughts. Let's do a live reaction to me watching this debate on Piers Morgan. I'll try and jump anywhere where there's sort of got some boring bits. But to give you, I guess, the background of where this starts from, Dave Smith, again, very not necessarily pro-Trump. He's a libertarian by culture. He was definitely pro-MAGA. Well, I guess more so, it'd be better off to describe him as anti-Democrat. Like, he was very much against Biden and Kamala and the very sort of capitalist Democratic left that's sort of taken over the party for the last decade, really. And now has really shifted away from that pro-Trump messaging since they basically went into Iran. You know, he's a very never forever wars kind of guy. Then we have Ben Ferguson, who is this kind of mouthpiece. Last time these guys were on a podcast together, Dave Smith went super viral, super controversial by saying that arguably the US is the biggest terrorist organization on the planet, not Iran, which obviously went mental online. And I'm sure that's going to come up. So we'll talk about that. But what it was supposed to be was a rematch between Dave Smith and Solznick, who was on recently. He's on one of those sort of bro alpha boss kind of podcasts, went on, pooped the bed live on Piers Morgan against Dave, made it super petty, basically had like a business review live, stripped down, humiliated by his boss, PBD, and basically said, look, if you want to redeem yourself, you have to go on Piers Morgan and redo this debate. Within 24 hours of them redoing it, he bails, apparently, right? That's the part of this video I've watched so far. And they replaced him with Ben Ferguson, which in my mind is a win anyway, because you never quite got to see them resolve, you know, this kind of kickoff point that they both had after the terrorist USA claim. So we're going to kick it off from here, live react as much as we can. I may do a couple of jump cuts as we go. We'll see how it all pans out. So let's start off with the beginning of the debate, where they basically are about to talk about their last debate to kick off.
The IDF is the worst terrorist organization in the region. Let's get real. The United States of America is arguably the worst terrorist organization in the world. If you want to look over the last 25 years, how many innocent civilians we've slaughtered. You're getting us into the neocon. Yeah, that's right. You're getting us into the neocon seventh war, which they've been dying for the last 25 years.
See, what I hated about that comment there, right? Not even Dave Smith. I mean, it's very hard to argue if you take out your home team, right? So if you're an American and you hear that statement, it's going to be like, oh man, we can't be terrorists. We're America. It's like, but to the rest of the world who, let's say the Middle East, who have been bombed by your military and your leadership, who have had, you know, insurgency strikes, who have described deaths as collateral damage and necessary to take out the bad guy, a lot of them do view you as terrorists because you bring terror to their region with this insane military technology. Like, imagine just sitting there and then from the heavens, something just falls down and your entire world explodes and your family is dead. It's very hard to describe that as anything but an organization of terror. But if we take all the feelings all about, well, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, if we look at it from a raw numbers game about how many conflicts America and the IDF have been in the last, let's say, 50, 60 years, it is hard to argue the logic that with a lot of these strikes, even in Obama, like for anyone who wants to say, oh, you wouldn't say this about the Democrats, right? Because this comes out all the time, which is argued as to Trump. You've got, Trump delusion syndrome is quite often the argument they use against anyone criticizing them from the left, which I'm not that far left, by the way. They reel this out, but I mean, Obama was just as guilty with, his epic amounts of drone strikes during his tenure, killing insane amounts of civilians. So he wasn't innocent either. But America and the IDF combined definitely have more civilian blood on their hands than almost any other nation over that time period. So objectively, what Dave Smith is saying, I don't think it's wrong. I think biological measurements, let's look at the numbers on the scoreboard, the US is kind of winning. So I think I am kind of on Dave Smith's side about this one. When Ben Ferguson pulls out the, I think you want to look at that flag behind you, and this is obviously where the offline commentary went nuts, that everyone was like, this guy is un-American, like, he hates America. I don't think that's the case. Like, I think to sort of have this defense that to criticize America for some of its worst actions makes you un-American, I think is incorrect. I think it makes you dangerously close with commentary like that to you're anti-fascist is probably more accurate, is that if you have to bow down and say you cannot question what your country does, then you're a fascist society. And that's kind of where America's started to drift a little bit over recent years, that if you question the home team, whether it be America or zoomed into your particular political party, you're now the enemy. You know what I mean? Just for disagreeing on a point or even questioning the actions of your country or your party, you're now the enemy. I think that's super dangerous. And I think to say, well, he's un-American for saying this, I disagree. Like here in Australia, when we're looking at our war heroes and perhaps some bad things that they have done, I believe that we're doing the right thing as a country to investigate those crimes to see where that leads. So I think that's an insane statement to say you are un-American to make that accusation.
Now, as a consequence of that, all hell broke loose, obviously, online. And Dave,
Can't imagine how much he must have got.
Dave, I'm sorry, but you hate the country. If you say America is the worst terrorist organization in the world, you just do. And Dave has since responded to that on this show. But Ben, let's just get you to, because Dave's already explained what he meant about this.
Yeah.
And many people agree with it, right? And, just to prep you up for this, you're about to defend the charge that America is not the world's worst terrorist organization within hours of Donald Trump posting to the world that a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. But
there is an insanity to that statement. And watching all of the, pro-Trumpers out there trying to pretzel themselves into, well, no, I think you need to understand that what Trump meant was, if you have to go to that much precursory language to say, well, actually what this guy meant when he was threatening to destroy an entire civilization, and the whole world, without context, you have to hear that statement and go, well, I'm assuming that he means everyone, and that probably means nukes, which is a terrifying thing. Like when you have a guy who is seemingly becoming even more unstable in the White House, threaten to wipe out a civilization with a country that I believe has the most amount of nuclear weapons on the planet, it is an insane threat, right? And as I said on a previous episode of this, he's pre-calling out, the war crimes he intends to do. But the part that drives me crazy about this argument, right, is that one of the justifications for why they had to go to Iran, that they keep saying this over and over, is that in Iran, they keep saying, right, death to America, death to all Americans. Like, well, they want us to not exist. If they had their way, they would come here and wipe out our whole civilization. We need to take them seriously with what they say. But when Donald Trump says exactly the same language as this terrorist organization, right, as the way they label it, the IRGC, who are definitely not the good guys in anyone's story, it is really hard to separate this argument because it should be the same on both sides. It's like, well, surely they could come out on the Iranian side and say, well, actually, it's not saying that we want all Americans dead. It's just that we want the leadership gone. Like, that's who we find is evil because that's what they've basically done to us, right? They're evil. They've done bad to us, so we want them dead. We don't mean average Joe America. But then on this side of the argument, they go, Trump didn't mean everyone. When he says the whole civilization, he just means the IRGC. Either side could play that game. It's a really dumb argument, in my opinion, to say on this side, well, Iran definitely meant what they said, but Trump, he doesn't mean half of what he said. And you took him out of context. The context was deadline, everybody goes boom. Let's see what he has to say.
In the context of the words coming from the President of the United States, quite hard to argue that that is in itself, those words are not the words you would normally associate with the leader of a terrorist organization.
Yeah, look, I think two things about what the president said there. He's clearly talking to the leadership in Iran, and he's saying that you are going to destroy your people by not opening the Strait of Hormuz. I'm not screwing around. This goes back to FAFO. The president of the United States of America.
Can we just abandon the FAFO talk from absolute dweebs in their little pen blue suits who come on and go FAFO when it looks like they couldn't beat their way out of a wet paper bag? Right? The way all these dweebs come out and talk tough when they've never seen combat, they've probably never been in a real fight. And I know that doesn't matter, but it is so like real pussy behavior when they do this. Well, they said FAFO and now they're effing O. And it's just like, ugh, I really hate how they're trying to like out-bro this and they're trying to get out there to this young male voter base with this language. It's so dumb.
Is using the same foreign policy that Hillary Clinton used, that Bill Clinton used, that Jimmy Carter used, and that Barack Obama used.
When did any of them threaten, Ben? When did any of them threaten?
Let me finish the point I'm going to make there real quick, because it's important.
Right.
This president, the only difference between his foreign policy with Iran and the other Democrats I mentioned was they all said that they couldn't get a nuclear weapon, and Donald Trump said, I am actually agreeing with you, and I'm going to do it.
See, the thing is, though, other presidents enacted policies to stop them from refining, and there was agreements in place that Trump ripped up, right? Number one is that they did hold, I think it was to about 3% refined, please correct me if I'm wrong on this, under the previous agreement that was ripped up by Trump in his first term. So, I mean, presidents didn't take no action. I mean, sanctions were in place. Then there was this agreement where obviously they said, okay, we won't refine, and that some of their sanctioned money or embargoed money was allowed to be opened up and they were able to have that back to them. A very controversial thing to let that money flow back to them. But I mean, they weren't reproducing nukes at the time. But then again, can we just abandon the nuke story at this point? Like, I mean, every source within the government who actually knows what they're talking about keeps saying that there are no nukes. All right, we saw Kent say it, that there was no evidence that there was. We heard Tulsi Gabbard say it in intelligence briefings last year and earlier this year. They did the strikes last year and said it was all gone, right? 9 months later, they're saying, well, it's all back and they're 2 weeks away from a nuke again. There is only really 4 people out there that are the sources of this information. It is Bibi Netanyahu, it is Donald Trump, it is 2 real estate agents who were sent to the Middle East to negotiate on behalf of the United States. One of them is the son-in-law of the President of the United States of America. All right? It is insane, the nepotism link here. And they're like, well, Jared and Wozniak, they said that at the table, they said they had 17 nukes already, so I guess we got to go. And Bibi's like, yeah. They definitely do. You should poke now. It's a ridiculous argument, right? They keep coming back to the nukes when the nukes are gone by all evidence. I mean, yes, they've got a stockpile of enriched uranium floating around somewhere that they're absolutely going to use now, but you need to pick an argument. Which one is it? It doesn't sound like nukes because apparently they're all gone. And if you didn't want nukes, why would you kill the guy who declared a religious fatwa, or however you say it, a religious embargo or religious war against them producing nukes? He's dead now. He's gone. You killed him. If that was your goal, that was probably not a great first day.
I'm going to stop them. And you cannot be a terrorist to the world while Donald Trump is the president of the United States of America, shut down shipping lanes you have no right to shut down, and expect that there be no consequences. Do
you know what? I was actually Googling after this, and I know Google's a fallible tool, but I was looking into like how far offshore is technically still your territory. And it seems like it's this, I think it's about 12 miles offshore or something like that. That's still your territory. So I had to look at how much technically, if we respected the sovereignty of nations and how far their waterway goes from their shoreline, how much of it is Iran kind of by international maritime law entitled to? You know, because if you look at the Panama Canal, there's fees taken by the Panama government. If you look at the Suez Canal, there's fees that are taken there. There are waterways all around the world that obviously it's like, well, look, this is a major trade point to allow us safe passage and to keep the upkeep. We're going to pay a toll. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want this because we get oil from the region, and I really believe that this is all bullshit. However, none of this existed until this war. Anyway, I am curious that extended piece from their land into the water that extends that distance covers more than half of the Strait of Hormuz. So those 10-point plan that the Iranians have put out to the US saying, well, look, what we could do going forward is that ourselves and Iran and Oman, all right, which is basically the shortest point or the shortest gap across the Strait of Hormuz, basically that whole thing is not international waters by international definition. That in theory, if Oman and Iran made an agreement, everyone technically is passing through, depending on which side of that line there are, either Iranian or Omani waters. So one could argue that they've always had, I don't want to use the word right to do this, but it may have been an option that they could have threatened to enforce in a different world. The Omanis would never. But obviously the Iranians at this point, I think they're going to push it. Like they smell blood in the water. They can leverage the US, who's been pressured into this horrendous situation, to let them toll this waterway. But it is fascinating when they say they have no right to do this, when other countries with the same kind of narrow restrictions have actually collected tolls. I don't think they should. I don't agree with it, right? Please don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I am trying to be fair about, well, do they have a right to allow, you know, some sort of payment system through ships going through their not international waters, but their own sovereign waters?
President doesn't bluff. And so when he puts that
he does
out,
bluff.
I think he's had about enough of this. I think he's had about enough of the fact that Iran, even after we go and kill their first level, their second level, their third level, and their fourth level of people, they're still not giving in. He's like, okay, you guys want to play this game, FAFO, and I'm going to act.
Let it
exactly,
go.
by the way, why
you're not a bro.
But just before I go back to Dave to respond to that, explain to me the difference between the belief that Donald Trump has about Iran, that they want death to America, death to all Americans. That's why they want a nuclear weapon. And if they get one, they will kill millions of Americans, which is why America has to stop them. And the President of the United States,
that's the new reason, is it?
He wants to wipe out an entire civilization in one night.
It's the same language.
Which can only be done with nuclear weapons or weapons of that power.
Well,
so look, as I say, look, I don't think he's going to do that. But he has said he's going to do that. Many people think he's already committed a war crime.
This is before the ceasefire. This is obviously filmed.
To do that. But that's for another day. But my point is, what is the difference in terms of language between the head of Al-Qaeda...
I'm glad Piers is going here. This is what I just said.
...wanting to wipe out millions of Americans, or Iran wanting to do that, and America wanting to do that? I mean, that would be Dave's point.
I can't believe I'm impressed with Piers Morgan right now.
Before we go to him, what is the difference?
Well, look, I think the president here is a guy that always pushes the limit on what he's saying, especially when he's dealing with bad guys, whether it was in Venezuela, whether it's narco-terrorists, or whether it's the Ayatollah and those that are in charge right now in Iran. Do I think he's going to indiscriminately kill a bunch of people? Of course not.
He's already done that?
I think that's the intent of the tweet? Of course not. If you've talked to the president and you know what he says here, you can either just try to hit him on that and score political points, or you can look at what the president has done so far. He has been incredibly certain.
I think everyone is looking at what he's done so far. I think that's the problem.
He's not been going after and just bombing. I'll go to an example that I think Dave used on this show. He's saying Israel's just bombing all these buildings in Gaza, for example.
Yeah.
That's not what the president's done here at all. The president has been
very
surgical
civilian
in using our military.
And he's threatening more.
I have no doubt that that's what he's going to do here. And what he's saying is, if I go after your electrical grid, you literally are going back to the Stone Ages when there was no electricity.
See, the amount of cope in this, that it's like, well, he meant this, which means this. And by Stone Age, he means that we're just talking about the electricity specifically. So what he's actually saying is quite a clever comment, because he's not threatening to, blow them away so that their whole civilization is destroyed. We're just talking about turning off the lights. That's all it is. That's all. It's if you have to pretzel yourself so much to defend a Trump tweet, maybe the tweet was problematic. Like, can we just say that was X or Truth Social, I'm imagining? Can we just say it was problematic? Like, it's okay to just say, look, he could have chosen his words more carefully, right? And just said, this is what we're going to do. But again, even the electrical grids, still a war crime by definition, right? To target civilian infrastructure that will turn off the lights at hospitals, will turn off ventilators, will turn off heating, will turn off air conditioning in countries where like hot is hot, man.
So if you want to hit the president political points to win a political argument, fine, do that. But what the president's saying in that tweet, I think, is directly to the leadership in Iran and telling them, I'm not screwing around. This is going to be very bad for you. Open up the Strait of Hormuz and do it immediately. We can have a ceasefire. You guys have been talking to us for a while.
It's so
now.
hilarious
You
that
know
he
how
did
to do
cuck out
stall and
after
delay
this.
tactics. This is a deadline. This
I'll have to find this guy
line.
afterwards and find out what he said
Other presidents
about
have given
the
red lines before. They just don't back them up. This president does. Barack Obama didn't back up his red line multiple times on foreign policy issues, including when chemical weapons were used.
Neither is Trump, though.
That is true. But Dave Smith, let me come to you. I mean, my big problem with this is, like I say, this will be airing after that deadline has passed. And my guess is the Iranians will not concede in the way that Trump wants them to before this deadline. Maybe I'm wrong, and maybe they will, but I don't think they will. And therefore, they call his bluff to a degree, and Trump will not then go through with what he vowed to do, which is
look
wipe
at you,
out the
Piers, you little
entire
fortune teller.
Iranian population.
He was right.
And then he becomes, the emperor with no clothes to a degree, the boy who cried wolf. It's like, there's a danger in that as well, in the president of the world's greatest military not doing what he says he would do
multiple
if
times now.
XYZ doesn't happen.
What is this, the third or fourth deadline?
Well, okay, so let me say, first of all, there's just this obvious contradiction in what Ben just said there, which is that on one hand, he's saying the president doesn't bluff. He draws a red line and he sticks to it. And then on the other hand, saying, that's just Donald Trump. He talks crazy like this. And you're just trying to win a cheap political argument if you look at what he's literally saying. It can't be both of those things now, can it?
Yeah,
if he doesn't bluff, then Donald Trump has promised to send them back to the Stone Age, that it will be the end of the civilization, never to be recovered, and that presumably starting tonight
their electrical grid.
hits their
Didn't
bridge and
tweet,
power
though.
plant days. Okay,
Yes.
so if he doesn't, right. So remember the non-interrupting rule. So if he's either bluffing
So
or
petty.
he's not bluffing here. Now, obviously, it does bode well
Still got
for
the
this
price tag on his little
particular
Stanley Cup.
political argument that sparked
you to
off on
understand
your
how
show
much
a
I
few
spend?
weeks ago, that now Donald Trump is making these threats. But the position Ben's in here, it's almost like being the White House press secretary. If we were talking last week and I had said, Donald Trump's going to say this, you would have been like, no, he's not. No one's saying that. This is ridiculous.
Oh, true.
But now he's said
I'm sure
it, so
Levitt
now you
would
have
have been
to defend
standing there
how
going,
he doesn't bluff, but also he doesn't really mean what he said. Look, Piers, I don't know. I hope you're right. But all the indications here are that tonight's 8 p.m. deadline is going to come and go without the Iranians capitulating. And so Donald Trump has really put all his chips in on the center of the table here. So to the dynamic you just laid out, he's now painted himself into this corner for absolutely no reason.
It is true, man. Like, I mean, I know they're reading in Islamabad. I think it's today, Saturday. So it's going to be really fascinating to see like what negotiations they have, especially when you've already got breaches of Iran's perception of the ceasefire, because the IDF is still bombing the absolute crap out of Lebanon as we speak, which the Iranians were like, hey, that's not really what was in our 10 points, which Trump went out there and said, we can agree to this framework of their ideas, because it was not, set up that way. And of course, the IDF is going to play spoiler in this. They don't want this conflict to end. They want to be able to take that land in Lebanon. They've announced that, like, I think day 2 that they were in there, saying, well, obviously, Hezbollah's got to go. But yeah, I mean, it's exactly a great point by Dave Smith, is that these negotiations, Trump's probably coming in at his weakest point. And that if he had have done this weeks ago, he could have done this. They could have gone in, killed the Ayatollah, done a bunch of bombing, got rid of I think the claims about the Air Force and the Navy have been around for 2 or 3 weeks already, right? So more than half the war. So why not do this moment then? It's because of the international pressure on oil. Like, he's coming in at his weakest point, right? You don't go to a negotiating table when you're at your weakest point. You go there when you've got the strength. It's a weird strategy. Dave's right.
He's painted himself into this corner where he's either got to do something huge or, as you said, be exposed as just being a complete bluffer.
My
not
guess is,
a real
here's the difference.
Hang on, Ben. But my guess is he'll say, you know what, we're getting somewhere with the Iranians. The new leaders want to do a deal, so we're going to give them a bit more time, which is what he's been doing throughout this war. And Ben, the trouble with doing that is if you keep doing that, but the Iranians keep saying, no, we're not talking to you. What are you talking about? And they keep the Straits of Hormuz shut, and they carry on firing weapons at their Gulf neighbors, and they carry on exactly what they're doing. And then you have Pete Hegseth saying, we've got total air dominance, and right until one of our fighter planes gets shot down, and we have to send in $300 million
worth of rescue
mission to get the pilots out. That doesn't say to me that all these defenses have been destroyed, does it?
Yeah.
Piers, we have total air dominance over the country, and hitting one of our planes. Yeah, when you're throwing a lot of stuff up in the air, going after airplanes, there is a very good chance you'll be able to get one. That's why it's called war. No one said that they would never touch one of our airplanes. Go find that quote. It doesn't exist. But the fact that we have total dominance over the airspace is proof. The fact that we were able to go in there with helicopters and do real search and rescue missions and bring them home. By the way, some of those helicopters also got shot at from the ground.
I am fascinated by this conspiracy theory, which, is it a conspiracy? I don't know at this point, where they're saying that this rescue mission may have actually been an accident, that the whole reason there was so much military hardware there at that time was because they were secretly trying to sneak in like Navy SEALs and what other top secret infantry they've got to recover the uranium. Because then they could really sell the big story of the war. Now they don't have nukes. Now we win. Where we got our key objective done. So if you haven't seen that conspiracy theory, look it up. I may even do a different episode on it, like as more information evolves. But it is insane if you really think about the US, given their predisposition to sacrificing people. I don't know that I buy the $300 million commitment, although there's questions that dollar figure may have been more with how much hardware was lost to recover one pilot. I am curious whether they would spend that kind of cash to do that. I mean, 1980s American movie America, sure, absolutely. We leave no man behind, but they've left plenty behind. You know what I mean? So I am fascinated by that whole storyline.
Some of them with AK-47s from the ground. That doesn't mean that it's totally perfect. In Venezuela, we had total air superiority there. We also had one of the guys that was flying one of the helicopters get shot from the ground. It's called war. The idea that people aren't going to get...
Sorry, is it called a war? I thought they couldn't call it a war because if they called it a war, they would need congressional approval. Maybe I'm wrong on that.
Hit, or things aren't going to get hit, or equipment aren't going to get hit. That's a video game. That's absurd. That is not what the president's saying. That's not what the Pentagon is saying. When you have total air dominance, it means you can do and hit what you want to 99.9% of the time, and they're not coming back after you. They don't have radar systems. We've taken them out. We're able to pretty much fly freely over that country and hit targets that we want to hit. And so I think what you're saying is basically you're trying to make it a lot worse than it is. Dave said on the last show, and I was watching it earlier as I was prepping for this, that this is a quagmire. If you go, and this is the part where I say it's like rooting against America. The definition of a quagmire, if you ask social media, is a little different than if you actually look up the definition or you ask AI. A quagmire is years. A quagmire is 2+ years if you look at how they teach it in military.
See, if you have to debate the semantics of the term, and don't get me wrong, I do this all the time, but you're kind of in troubled ground already. Like quagmire, to me, the definition is it's basically something where you are stuck and it's not easy to get out of, right? It doesn't matter if it takes you 15 minutes to get out or, years and years of Iraq-style warfare. The reality is it is not as simple as go in, blow this up, and then walk away. That's what America thought this was going to be. They now have to negotiate their way out of it. They have to negotiate an end to this or go to the extreme and literally annihilate Iran. That is, by definition, a sticky situation, a quagmire. I mean, let's not debate the semantics of that. It's absolutely a quagmire. I mean, the essence of what Dave's saying is 100% correct. If you're debating the language like this, like a dork, it's very obvious that you are not on the right side of that argument.
Schools. This isn't coming from me. This is if you go to West Point, they say if you are bogged down in a war and you are losing or stagnant, they use Vietnam as an example of that. They use the never-ending war in Afghanistan as another example. The word quagmire starts being used after years. we're talking weeks into this thing, like 2 months in. We're talking about
Look at Dave.
The fact
so
that
bored.
we've taken out, and you say, well,
Serial
the president's got a
there.
problem here, and they don't believe him. You've taken out their top leader, then their replacement, then their replacement, then their replacement. You've taken out their air superiority. You've taken out their Navy. Like, you guys, I'm sorry, like the idea that this is a quagmire or is not successful, and well, they won't believe the president if he bluffs on this one. Call the last 4 dead guys that were the leader of Iran and tell me they don't believe President Trump.
But it hasn't made a difference, right? That's the thing, is that they've set up this sideways infrastructure in Iranian military structure that it doesn't really matter if the top guys fold. They've got all this sideways leadership. They've been able to survive this. They planned this forever because they knew that they were going to hit this way. And again, culturally, you have to understand that a lot of these guys fighting this war are religious zealots. Like, they believe that they're going to go on to get, you know, the promised rewards of being a martyr when they go to heaven, right? So when you have that kind of religious zealotism, I don't know if that's a word, zealotry, let's say, it's really, really hard to just sort of go, okay, well, we cut the head off the snake. But this is a Hydra. You know, this is very much like the Marvel Hydra enemy. You know, you cut a head off, but it just grows back like so quickly and nothing changes. Like, they don't miss a missile strike because, oh, we're really confused. What do we do now? Jeff's gone, right? No, they carry on because they planned for this. So to make this point of we killed their leadership, it hasn't made a difference. They've taken out their Air Force, very true. They've taken out their Navy, absolutely true. But missiles are still raining down hell on the Gulf partners of the United States, right? And they're absolutely suffering. I feel bad for everyone in that region because the long-term effects is going to last far beyond this conflict for all of those nations, right? In a way that I generally hope they do recover, but I don't know if they will. I really hope they do. And then, of course, you go through to Israel, who's still getting the absolute crap bombed out of them until the ceasefire was agreed as well. So you can say that you've made all of these things and you've done all of those things, but has it made a measurable difference when the day before, I believe, the ceasefire was one of the highest ratio of missile days leaving Iran to bomb other nations that day, right? So what have you actually degraded? With all of your military superiority, you are still no closer to the outcomes, and you need to pick which one you want, but any of those outcomes, you are no closer. Unless your goal specifically was, let's kill first X tiers of leadership, remove the former Ayatollah, destroy the Air Force, destroy the Navy, then okay, you did achieve that. But anything beyond that you've stated, failure until this point in your little quagmire.
Why, if the United States has such incredible, overwhelming military success in this war so far, why are the Straits of Hormuz still shut?
Because I think if you look at the issue there, number one, you're dealing with international issues there. And number two, you're also dealing with the fact that it is a waterway. And if you can't just like go in there and bomb the hell out of it and then expect the ships to come through. It has to be orderly. Three, if you talk to maritime individuals, specifically those that deal with insurance, I did about an hour-and-a-half phone call saying, teach me everything. It has to be a safe place or you cannot get the insurance. The last thing you do is go in there militarily because then nobody will insure any of these boats.
The last thing you can do is go in militarily. That's what he just said. So why beg for NATO to go in and fix it militarily? How are the US going to fix it militarily if you can't do that, right? He's arguing against himself right now.
At all. So therefore, they will not come through the Strait of Hormuz because they can't get the insurance policy they need for the maritime movement.
Yeah, because Iran can still hold a hostage.
Some of this is not that complicated. You just need to ask questions.
Okay, before I go to Dave, just be very clear with me in your head what victory looks like.
Good question.
At what point can the Americans,
where does this guy
Donald
stand?
Trump, claim victory
Place your bets.
leave?
Is he going to be a nuke guy, a regime change guy? I mean, pick the others. What's he going to be? Right, everyone place their bets. I'm going to go no nukes guy.
To me or Dave?
To you, before I go to Dave.
Oh, to me.
Yeah.
I think there's two different definitions here of victory. I think there's the clear victory, which Trump talked about from the very beginning, and all past Democratic presidents since 1979. Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Boom, you guys owe me $20.
That is my first definition of victory. If we have Iran that has been pushed back to the Stone Ages and they're nowhere close to enriching their uranium at 60+%, and that we know that we are safe from a nuclear Iran and a dirty bomb, they've clearly said it over and over again, death to America. We know that's their intent. They've been saying it for 40+ years. That is my definition of victory. A bonus.
So again, he's going to criticize Trump for saying he's going to nuke a civilization. And where's the criticism of the leadership in Israel? Right? They're threatening to eliminate people all the time. They're enacting new policies to make the killing of people who are not of their own faith in their nation far worse or easy to kill them, right? Where's the same criticism here, right? We're selective about these points, aren't we, Benny Boy?
On top of that, a tier 2 victory, which I think the media has already made this the new standard, which I disagree with fundamentally, is that there is regime change. The president's made it clear he would love for there to be regime change. And by the way, there has been. We've killed their top 4 guys. So
there's been regime change thing? Come on. Come on. Because the main guy died, and then maybe guy number 2, I mean, we still haven't seen him. I mean, there's a lot of reports that that guy is a vegetable on a ventilator somewhere, which, you know, who knows? It's so hard to get the truth on either side when it comes to this sort of stuff. But let's say that you've killed Ayatollah number 1, maybe number 2. There will be a number 3. Let's be really real about this.
That's 4x regime change, in my opinion. If 4 people that were in charge are no longer in charge,
Dave doesn't buy
that's
it.
pretty good. Would I love for the people in Iran to
Love
be
how
able
I
to
talk
take
about
over
these
and
guys
have
like I know
genuine
them?
freedom? Yes. Is that what I consider a victory? No. That is a bonus. All I care about is that Iran doesn't have a nuclear weapon, and they're not killing more men and women in uniform. They've killed more men and women in uniform from America than any other country in my lifetime.
Is that true? I have to look that up later. I wonder if that is true. But my argument would be this, right? This is the Mr. Miyagi argument, right? If you don't want your servicemen and women to die, no be there, right? Now, did they kill these Americans on American soil? No. Did they kill them in other nations other than the ones that were nearby or in Iran? Right, yeah, this is a technically probably true thing. I'm betting that they have killed, as a percentage base of the American servicemen and women who have died, I'm sure Iran and their proxies and terrorist organizations have committed a significant portion of those deaths, no doubt. But they had to be there to be killed, right? If they weren't there, they don't die. Let's be real.
I want that threat off the table. That's my definition of victory, no doubt about it.
Dave Smith, your response.
Well, I mean, again, just as is almost always the case with war propaganda, it's just the contradictions are just everywhere around you. It's like,
wrong.
My secondary, I was about to. My secondary goal is regime change, but there's already been regime change in this war, but it's not a war. But we've always been at war for 47 years.
Always said it's a war.
mean, Piers. Okay, buddy. Yeah. Okay. Well, you say it's a war. The administration won't admit that because it's totally illegal if it is. Even Donald Trump himself said we can't call it a war for legal reasons. But yes, of course, it is.
Me and Dave are on the same page today.
But, I mean, Piers, if you just think about how many people, and I got to say, particularly, I'm stunned by the Iranian expat types, which I've debated a couple on your show before, because I always am a little bit more forgiving to them when they say something like, you know, it's just how brutally repressive the mullah and the ayatollah's regime is and how they want to liberate the people. But not one of them have jumped off board since Donald Trump has essentially announced total war against the civilian population.
Yeah, that's
and here
true.
Again, Ben repeats, send them back to the Stone Age. I'm sorry, did women have liberation in the Stone Age? Is that when everyone gets to take their blinkers off?
I said that earlier. But Dave, I don't mind the debate, but I said it earlier.
And does that lead to
right? I know,
but and that leads
electricity.
Right,
that has nothing to do with women's rights.
Yeah, but Ben, sorry, hang on.
I'm sorry. We said we're not going to.
So petty.
Ben,
it always goes this way now.
The civilian population.
Well, Dave, what Ben is doing is what I've noticed a lot of people on the right have been doing, who are still very pro-Trump in this war, is you're translating what Trump apparently meant when he said,
it's so
we're
true.
going to bomb you back to the Stone Ages. You have decided it means no electricity because it's the only way you can really justify it.
I would love to see Trump react to when they do this. It's like, what? No? He would probably just go out and just because he doesn't like other people speaking on his behalf. It's like, no, what I meant was I was going to blow them back to the Stone Age because I'm going to kill them all, right? Because they don't care about them. I'm sure if he heard someone like a Ben Ferguson, it's not a mutual respect. Let's be real. The way these guys kowtow down to Trump, you think that guy has even an ounce of a respect for douche nozzles like this? No shot. No shot.
Right?
Piers,
and
which
so
is still pretty bad,
Donald Trump and I would say, Ben, I would say this. When you said victory, that's why it's interesting to get you to clarify what victory is. When you said it, it's stopping the Iranians from developing a nuclear weapon, a dirty bomb. But that's what we were told had been achieved last summer.
Correct.
At the end of the 12-day war, Trump literally said that. We have stopped them developing a nuclear weapon. Mission accomplished.
Do you know what actually reminds me of is like that clip from Tropic Thunder where it's like, was it Scorcher? Scorcher 1. He goes, until we needed him. Then we needed him again. Then we needed him 4 more times. It's like, we need to go and get the Iranian material, but then we need to get it again. Then we needed to get it again another 4 times.
Here we are, less than a year later, 9 months later, and we're being told that victory will be if the United States and Israel stop the Iranians developing a nuclear weapon. But what's happened in 9 months?
Piers, great question. You have 60% enriched uranium that we know about that they still have. That's part of what we want to get out of the country. Mm-hmm. That is just taking data and looking at it and then saying, is this still a threat? How quickly can you get 60% to where it's military grade, to where you can get a dirty bomb? It's really damn close. Probably. So the president made another calculus here and said, okay, we hit those 2 facilities. They didn't stop what they were doing. They still have it way too close to military grade where they can do a dirty bomb. We know their intent is to kill innocent people and get a dirty bomb. They've said it over and over again. So therefore, because of that information, we are going to go in yet again, and we're going to make sure that America is safe and the rest of the world is safe.
All right, so Ben, do you accept that if the Americans and Israelis do not get the enriched uranium out of Iran, this is not victory, it is a failure, the war will have been lost?
What are you going to say, Ben?
I think there's 2 ways you can look at that. And again, this is coming from a military mindset. Number one is I talk to people in the military, they say, look, if they can't access it, right? If we bomb it in and we push it in and they can't access it anymore, that could be considered a victory from a military standpoint perspective. And again,
but they did that in last year. They bombed that facility and they buried it underground. So it's hard to get to. So mission accomplished. Go home.
This is way above my pay grade. That's why I ask other people questions that are experts.
Alaska says I talked to a military expert. What's the bet he talked to someone who played Modern Warfare 2 one time? You know what I mean?
Would we love to get it out? Yes. But if we can't get it out and they can't get it out, that can be a victory. It depends on where it is. It depends on how much we bombed it. It depends on how secure it is if it stays in the ground there. So I don't say it's only one or the other, success or failure.
Weird argument.
It depends on the information on the ground. And if it is in a place where they're like, no one's going to be able to get to this, we can't get to it, neither can they, it's now unusable, that's a success as well. But I'd love to get it out of there. Yes, I don't like Iranians having anything close to it or having it in their backyard.
The problem is,
if you put it in the ground, it's done, it's done.
Let me come back to Dave. I mean, the problem is, I've got increasingly limited confidence in the statements about the state of Iran's uranium and ability to build a bomb because of what happened last summer. I believed what I was told, that after the 12-day war, that was it. The threat had been neutralized.
We're all idiots,
they couldn't build a nuclear weapon. That was it. And here we are in March. This was last summer.
Yeah.
And in March, now we're being told they've got all this enriched uranium. None of it got removed last time. It's still there. And how are we going to know whether we've removed it from their ability to use it or not? We're not going to know. So, unfortunately, that to me doesn't look like a very substantive victory claim to me. Yeah. It's just going to muddy the waters again.
That's right. That's right. I mean, and look, the fact that the goalposts just get moved so much, and like you said, Piers, not that long ago, just last summer, where all the people who supported the 12-day war were boasting and demonizing anybody who opposed it as what a success this was because we obliterated their nuclear program. But like, if we have to go back and fight a whole new war right now over that nuclear threat, then that was wrong. Then you got to admit you were wrong about it back then.
From Trump.
And if not, but
here is the quote from Trump, Dave. This is last year, after the 12-day war. I don't think they'll ever do it again. They've had it. It was a complete obliteration. They were set back decades. Turned out, decades was actually 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry. This is just too ridiculous to stand. And if I could just go back to the last point there, because, you know, seeing as how this whole thing started off of my claim of the U.S. Regime being the biggest terrorist organization in the world, I mean, even if we are to accept Ben's interpretation of what Donald Trump was saying here, if you were just saying like, no, the Stone Age means we take out all the bridges and all the electricity, like, okay, but what does that mean? Well, hey, Ben, listen, we said the one thing was we're not going to interrupt. You've interrupted every time I've spoke, and I haven't done it once to you. So let me finish making a point here. So what does that mean? What does it mean when you take out the electricity to a civilian population of 90 plus million people? It means babies on incubators die.
Well, I said ventilators, but we were pretty close.
Homes and can't get to the hospital because the bridge has been taken out. It means like the worst, most brutal level of human suffering inflicted intentionally on a civilian population. And if you want to sit here and play all these games where like it's terrorism whenever any of them do it, but it's counterterrorism if America or the Israelis do it.
Oh, that's a good way of saying it.
It's like you picking on me for saying quagmire instead of quagmire, disaster, whatever word you want to use. At the end of the day, what you're talking about here is terroristic
can I ask you a question,
in
a
nature.
serious question. How do you do the calculus? And if we go with the premise that you just said about if you take out the electricity, by the way, you're assuming they have no generators at the hospital, which they do. You're assuming that ambulances can't run, they still can. But how do you do the calculus? If you take out all the bridges,
it makes it tougher.
But how do you do the calculus of a range?
By the way, part of my background, I've spent a lot of time with hospitals in various parts of the world. Those generators are not instantaneous. There is a delay. Okay. Now that's in westernized hospitals. There is a very minimal delay, maybe a couple of minutes. If you are in a surgical suite with a child open on your table and the lights go out, when you're making an incision, when you are putting a stitch in, when you are doing something super advanced and technical, where even a 1 millimeter, like let's talk about brain surgery, a 1 millimeter mistake is the difference between someone speaking and not ever again. That is a hell of a long time. Now, in this part of the world, okay, there are large oceans of difference between the most advanced hospitals, let's say maybe in the middle of Tehran. I've never been to an Iranian hospital, but I'm making some assumptions for context from countries that I have been to, that their main medical facilities, you may get that 1 or 2 delay. But in others, no. They don't have surge protection at that level. A lot of their systems don't have battery backups. They rely on individual devices to have their own batteries. That whole argument to say, well, they've got this, so if we blow up all the power points, all the power plants, all the children will be fine. All the surgeries will be fine. Hospitals will have power. It's all fine. Generators also have a finite lifetime, right? There might be a diesel generator if they're running super dirty, but a lot of the other ones that are running on more advanced battery systems, they need to be replaced. They need to be updated. And if you have, let's say, a large invading force blocking your ability to get new stuff in, kind of like what the US is doing to Cuba right now, you don't have that. In fact, I think Ryan Grimm might have done a story recently on Cuba. I think he went down to Cuba and was talking about how similar things to what I'm talking about right now are happening in Cuba. And I don't know what the differences between the Cuban and the Iranian hospital setup is, because Iran, you know, despite what a lot of people think, is quite an advanced civilization comparatively to what people may assume, that, you know, they're probably in a better place. But still, I think that that's a really foolish argument to say, well, no, I think we're being a little bit too hyperbolic here, that everyone will be fine if we blow up all the civilian infrastructure in a hospital environment. That is spoken by someone who's never seen that up close and didn't call a friend to see if they, you know, VR'd simulated one time to get their advice.
And getting a nuclear weapon and then killing a whole lot of innocent people. Like, you're not, I don't like war, okay? I don't like innocent people suffering.
Gotcha.
But when I look at a nuclear weapon in the hands of a terrorist regime that sponsors more terrorism than any other country in the world in my lifetime, who's killed more American soldiers than any other regime in my lifetime, that's a fact, and a country that declares over and over again they want to kill you. If they get a nuclear weapon, and we did appeasement, which is what Obama did and what Biden did, and you just stuck with that, and then one day they get the bomb, and then they put it out in the world, and they blow up a city, How do you do the math on that one?
It's assuming that they'd be foolish enough to do it. See, all this is based on assumptions of saying, well, we know that they would do it if they got it. But I mean, they had all these missiles sitting there for years, right? Look at how much death and destruction Iran has rained down on their Gulf neighbors and Israel in the past 5-6 weeks. It's a hell of a lot. They've had this capacity for a very extended period of time. Not only that, their capacity for missile production was so high, they were exporting it to Russia, right? They've been providing equipment to that war for years in very high numbers. If they had have kept all of that here, imagine the arsenal that they've been sitting on. But what did Iran do with it in that time? Now, we could argue about the proxies thing. I mean, I'll pay that obviously their proxies have done bad things, have been terrorists in those regions. But to say that Iran, well, we know from them that they would definitely do this, I don't think we have that evidence because we haven't seen them launch aggressor strikes with their current military technology. They've been purely retaliatory. And you may not want to agree with this, but they've been relatively measured in their response. Like they'll literally say, if you hit something of ours of type A, we will do the same thing in one of those nations the same. You hit a power plant, we're going to hit a power plant. Now, they've done it in a lot of countries that really did nothing to them except allow the US to launch from their countries. So I don't agree with it. But if you look at it objectively, which is always hard to do because I, love a lot of the people in that region, you have to admit that they have been relatively measured. And if we look back to the 12-day war, the most measured. Like we would probably still have been in this conflict we are now last year had they not have basically called Qatar and said, hey, we're going to make a show, shoot down all these missiles, then can we all relax? They didn't do that. This would have happened then. And I would argue that it would have been far worse for the US because they didn't have all these carrier groups in place back then. Right? That's a relatively new thing that they launched all of their hardware up closer so they have better ability to launch this. So, yeah.
Because you keep acting like America's doing something evil here.
Correct.
When all we're doing is trusting the terrorists when they say they want to kill you and they keep doing it, that if they get bigger weapons and they get ballistic missiles, they're going to use them.
But none of those have hit American soil now.
I mean, there's just so many just ridiculous presumptions built into that question.
Well, and then tell me what they are, because I want to know. Because if Iran says they're going to get a nuclear weapon, they're going to do it.
You literally ask a question, I get 3 words out to respond to it, and you're already interrupting.
But you said there's so many ridiculous things I said. Right. I asked you one.
You can tell he was building up to a point, and it's just douchey for Ben. Look, that's a hell of a pause screen. Look at that eye. It's a hell of a douchey thing. And to be honest, this is why Dave Smith wins so many of these debates. Like, I don't think he's ever the smartest guy in these pods. He's definitely very well read, very intellectual. But honestly, most of these guys just have the itch to not just let the other person give them enough rope to hang themselves, right? Whereas Dave will basically let these guys jump in. He'll drop these little statements, which they can't help but leap on. It's quite a subtle debating technique, but it is quite clever. If you watch a lot of Dave Smith debates, you'll see him do this a lot, where there'll be a little nugget, he's building up to a point, and then rather than just go on the super escalatory way that they're running, he'll just sit back and just go, all right, talk your nonsense, and then I'm going to catch you on something. So it's not a bad technique.
Question about a nuclear weapon. It's not a ridiculous list.
Yes, it is. Do I get a chance to talk now, or do you just want to ask questions to yourself?
So Betty.
Is this just pretend, or are you actually asking? Sure,
it's not a hard question, Dave. That's the point I'm
He's
making.
trying to answer you.
How do you do a calculus on Iran getting a nuclear weapon? That is not a list
this
of
is
things.
Literally. This is why I didn't want to deal with Ben on this, because this is just how he debates.
He's trying to answer it, twat.
I can't answer, or you won't shut up.
Really
Which
obvious,
one is
tough questions.
All right, Ben, you have given a solemn pledge not to interrupt.
This is just so ridiculous, dude.
Let Dave respond.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just for the record, Ben, everyone can see through this tactic. Everyone can see through it. First of all, the intelligence going... There you go. Yes, yeah. Every one of them can see through this bullshit. Okay, so the intelligence that we had leading into the 12-day war, which was right there in the annual threat assessment, which Tulsi Gabbard testified under oath in Congress, was that Iran had not made the political decision to start developing nuclear weapons yet. And so now you've got it as if we do nothing, not only do they have deliverable nuclear weapons, but they've used them offensively, which no country... Yes, you did. Which no country in the history of the world,
I said they had it 60%. 60% is not a nuclear weapon, Dave. Go back and listen to what I said. 60% is not a nuclear weapon. That is not what I said. This is why I interrupt you, because you make up shit that I never said. I never said they had a nuclear weapon. I used the word if and close.
Okay. Honestly, I'll just, if you want to let me speak, I will. Anyone can go back and listen to what you just said. I'm not claiming you said 60%
yes, please rewind it on YouTube.
To be fair, I think Ben may have said it was 60%. I don't think he said they haven't.
You know what? Do you remember that?
I think he said that they
everyone can rewind it on YouTube.
This is just so stupid.
Man.
That was Switzerland when Marco Rubio said what he
Switzerland.
said.
Well
it's a bit like
Switzerland.
when Marco Rubio said, actually, the reason we preemptively attacked was because we'd heard the Israelis were going to go in, so we thought we'd better get in before the retaliation came. And the next day we were told that he hadn't said what we'd heard with his own mouth.
Yeah. That was
there
so
we go,
dumb.
Ben. You just did it again. So anyway, the point is that, look, and as I've made this point before on your show here, Piers, I mean, this is just like, even the argument here. Look, we sat by the United States of America while Joseph Stalin developed nuclear weapons, and we knew he was doing it.
Oh,
while
fair
Mao
point.
Zedong developed nuclear weapons, and we knew that he was doing it. These are the most evil people who have ever lived. We didn't launch a war of aggression to stop them. Now, that doesn't mean you don't pursue diplomatic
It is interesting, isn't it?
Goals here.
Why
but
Iran?
To say Obama, and listen, Obama and Joe Biden had horrible foreign policies in a million different ways.
Sure.
But it's not true that appeasement didn't work. They had a deal. If 60% enriched uranium was the big concern, well, Iran was down to like 3% enriched uranium until Donald Trump tore it up. Now, there were sunset provisions in the JCPOA, and perhaps it would have been better to try to strengthen them, to try to come up with a better deal here. But instead, at the behest of the Israelis, Donald Trump insisted on these ridiculous negotiating strategies. This no enriched uranium at all, no civilian nuclear program, no intercontinental ballistic missiles, no supporting Hezbollah or Hamas or any of this. And this was never going to lead to a deal.
Support a terrorist organization.
Well, it's not,
you think we should allow that?
It's not such a great thing when it leads to this.
And
now,
Ben,
is it?
and Ben, the
it's
point I
leading
would
to
make,
death and destruction.
Ben, the question I have for you is, Ben.
The whole mock outrage thing of, I can't believe he said that. He wants terrorist organizations to have massive weapons. It's like he's just going to conflate the hell out of what he just said. There's no way he's not going to do that.
We should allow Iran to sponsor terrorist organizations.
He
just said we should allow them in the deal to sponsor Hamas and Hezbollah.
No, he didn't. He just said that we made America. He said that they shouldn't be allowed to have those weapons. That's what Trump said. They shouldn't be able to have intercontinental ballistic missiles, which every other country in the world is allowed to have, right? So, I mean, we're being very specific here that this country can't do that, can't have nuclear power, right? Everyone has the right to start pursuing their own renewables. Everyone should have that right if we're going to survive as a planet in the long term, because our resources are finite. So to say they can't have those things is starting off in bad faith negotiations that was always destined to fail. That's why Trump wanted it ripped up. Well, maybe not even Trump. Like, maybe we know now that the orchestrator behind those deals, as Dave was kind of getting to, is that he was being pushed from behind the scenes to go down this road. Find a way to get this deal off the table so then we can go fight them. But to say that, you encourage them, that if you allow them to have missiles, you're saying that you should allow them to have it in all the terrorist organizations. This kind of argument really pisses me off, because it gets away from the core facts of what is actually happening in the central country of Iran. Yes, they sponsor terror. That is a terrible thing. Wish it didn't happen. They should absolutely not be providing missiles to those other nations. But to say that Dave is directly saying that Hezbollah and that Hamas or the Houthis should be allowed to have this technology, that's what Dave Smith is saying, is just so dishonest, it's crazy.
Like, what the hell world are we living in?
Let me ask you a question. Ben, if your position, Ben, if your position,
I'm a terrorist.
Hang on, Ben. If your position is that if a nation espouses a desire to wipe out another country, then the country on the receiving end has an absolute right to not just defend itself, but attack the country threatening them, right?
He said to go
That's the defense for, right?
I think it also has to be based on, do they have the ability?
Right, he says that. So do they have the ability? Like, does the US have the ability? Dave sees it coming. Look at that face. He knows exactly where Pierce is about to go.
Are they trying to get the ability to do it?
When the president of a country says publicly that he is going to, well, I'll read it again. A whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. There it is. I don't want it to happen, but it probably will. When a president of a country
Pierce is pissed off about this tweet. I could sense it.
Presumably, by your definition, Iran would now be perfectly entitled to attack the United States?
I think Iran's already been attacking the United States of America.
No,
That's why we're in this conversation right now. They've killed more American soldiers than anybody else in the world.
If they wanted to attack mainland America by your criteria,
never done it.
They would have an absolute moral justification because you have a nation
I'm not
in
going to say
America.
it's a moral justification. What I'm saying is, and I'll go back to what I said earlier, the President of the United States of America has said to them, you need to make this deal and open up the Strait of Hormuz. This is all about land that's not actually theirs, and you're not going to hold the world hostage. And if you do, continue to hold us hostage.
But see, that's talking about the modern consequence of them enacting this war, right? That didn't exist beforehand. So how is that the argument, right? He's just shifting it across now.
I am going to take out your bridges and your electricity, and that's on you. That is completely different than the scenario that you're asking. By the way, I wish you'd ask Dave the same question I asked him earlier. If they get a nuclear weapon and then detonated it somewhere in the world, how do you do that calculus?
Wait, hold on.
Answered the question yet.
That.
This is a petty point.
I
don't like it when Dave does this.
Exactly the question I asked.
I don't like it when he does this. Like it's so petty. Just like stay on the point. Like just go, oh, I thought you didn't see this. Yeah, it's stick to the facts. It's where it's better.
He did say, what if they got a bomb and then used it to wipe out a city?
Watch me do the same thing in the future if I debate someone.
That's what I was
claiming. I'm sure I will. I'll be a hypocrite.
You denied last time. You interrupted me when I said you were making that claim and said you never said that.
No, I said they didn't have the bomb. I said if they got the bomb, how do you make the calculus? And you haven't answered that question yet because you don't know how to answer it. Your foreign policy is flawed, Dave. Your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand, bother no one, and then no one bothers you. And when you're dealing with terrorists, that never works. 9/11's a great example of that, by the way. We were literally burying our head in the sand, acting like Osama bin Laden was not a threat after he kept saying he wanted to take out America.
Who made that threat? Who made him into a threat? Who sponsored 9/11? There's so much hypocrisy when they bring 9/11 into it with what the world knows now. And also the fact that led to, a lot of these quagmire wars is not a great time to be bringing this up. Like, I know that 9/11 is kind of what every modern politician or conflict defender from the States wants to bring out because obviously it evokes a lot of emotional response to a time where America was very much perceived as the victims and the good guys, right? Whereas it doesn't mean now what it used to because the world knows a lot more now about what really happened, who was behind it, but also what the US did with that justification of being there, what they did with it, right, on the ground.
You want to go after America. And every president did the same thing. They buried their hand in the sand and they said, we're not going to deal with him right now. We'll leave him alone.
Okay,
we won't get wars in the Middle East.
Let me ask you this,
so
Ben.
ridiculous and ahistorical.
Ben, what's interesting?
America was just not intervening. No, it's not actually. We were non-interventionist until 9/11. Yeah, right, please. We were bombing Iraq. We had a sanctions regime around Iraq. We had military bases in Saudi Arabia. And by the way, every one of the things that the terrorists subjected to were our interventions.
Nothing.
No.
Come on,
we were doing nothing.
You've been doing stuff for decades, brother.
We were not.
You don't know what you're talking about. The UN
were we invading a country in Iran on 9/11? No.
Can I finish the sentence?
See, this is like what we're doing at that moment in time. See, when you look at terrorist organizations, and this is why what the IDF has been doing for the last couple of years is going to lead in 5, 10, 15 years, if not earlier, to the largest spike in terrorism we've probably ever seen. With what the US is doing right now in the Middle East is going to lead to the biggest spike in terrorism possibly the world has ever seen, in my opinion. Why do I say this? How do these people get radicalized? They sit there and they watch. They're in their house. Nothing to do with them. A bomb falls through the roof, blows up their daughter, their son, their loved ones. Their whole world explodes. This person has nowhere to turn. They have a hatred now for the people who did that for their family and they vow revenge, right? Think of John Wick. I mean, that guy did all that because someone killed his dog, all right? What if John Wick is sitting there in a house right now in Iran, right? Or in Gaza, and then one of these guys sends a nuke through his house or sends a missile through his house. Everyone he knows and loves is dead. Do you think he's just going to go on with his life, or is he going to have a deep-seated hatred living within inside his soul? Now, maybe he's the John Wick character that wants to go to war, right? Maybe he's not. Maybe he has so much trauma, PTSD, and now generational hatred created within him towards the American regime that did this, or towards the IDF that did this, that then his kids come along and they are raised to hate those people. The reason you never had a mom, the reason you never had a dad, the reason you don't have a brother, the reason you have one leg, right? All of these things is passed down generation, generation, generation. This is how this hatred builds. This is how this cycle keeps perpetuating. And this is where these guys are so dismissive of, we did nothing. We did nothing at that time. Were we in the Middle East? Were we doing this at the particular time? No. So, Dave, you must be wrong. You must be wrong that we were doing nothing that deserved 9/11. 9/11 didn't start there. 9/11 started way, 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 way earlier in the deep-seated generational hatred that was created by the Americans by bombing these nations, by doing these regime change wars for decades at countries all across the Middle East. In a lot of cases, in countries that were relatively stable, but seemed to have wanted to move away from the petrodollar or from the structures of international banking, like Libya, for example, great example of a country that was seen to be doing just okay. And then all of a sudden, their leader is a terrorist by the definitions of the US. They have to go in and start murdering people. These people are created, right? They didn't exist without a little bit of help. So I'm not a huge fan of this argument that Ben's going after, because I think to say, well, look, we weren't doing anything at the time, so we were innocent victims. Come on now. Dishonest.
During 9/11.
Okay.
The answer is no. We were asleep at the wheel on 9/11. There's a reason why John Ashcroft wrote a book called Never Again, because we were so asleep at the wheel that we realized afterwards we can never allow it to happen again.
Never Again in 2026.
When Madeleine Albright was asked about how the UN had estimated that 500,000 children had died of starvation and malnutrition due to the Clinton blockade around Iraq, she said, and I quote, "That price is worth it." These were the non-interventionist years of peace and prosperity.
If that statement is true,
92, 93,
I'm Googling
94,
that
we're
later.
talking about 2001. That's a long ways off, bro. I said, what were we doing when 9/11 happened in the Middle East? In the Middle East on 9/11.
Try 1998.
Almost 2 decades earlier.
No, I'm talking about 3 years earlier. You don't know what you're talking about.
Even if it was 20 years earlier, I think my point stands. That, like, you've allowed that to fester. And okay, we weren't in Iraq or Iran, but you were definitely somewhere poking around and shooting something.
Madeleine Albright said that in the early 90s. You just said 90s on the show.
I didn't
2001 is when 9/11 happened. Am I wrong?
1998.
I already forget, but I don't think the date
it was
debate, like, if you have to go that specific,
Bill
who
Clinton
cares?
stopped being president in the year 2000, 1 year before 9/11. Sorry,
so
this is
you're
just math,
saying
Ben.
that the blockade of food is what caused 9/11 now?
No, I'm not saying it. Osama bin Laden himself listed it as one of his stated grievances, along with the military bases.
One of a list that was like the Unabombers list.
That also involves
it's a justification for why we went to war.
On Holy Land in Saudi Arabia,
I forgot about that.
U.S. support for brutal regimes that oppress Muslims in the region, and U.S. support for the Israelis, who have been occupying, at that time, for 30 plus years, the Palestinian territory. Yes, this is basic history. You can say I'm a fraud, but you don't know any of this.
Hold on.
You don't know any of this.
So I'm correct in saying that your foreign policy is bury your head in the sand and hope that no one bothers
you.
The
conflation arguments piss me off.
Keep the good times scrolling and the good things rolling. Felix Mobile. Get unlimited data for $40 a month, plus a tree planted every month you're with us. Felix Mobile. Good.
What if you could clean your retainer at the touch of a button? No more brushing or tablets. Over 4 years ago,
because you're saying anytime we stand up for us in the world, that immediately it's going to be our fault when we get attacked. That is your foreign policy.
Instead of you saying it, why don't I just say what I actually believe? What I believe is that we don't launch wars of aggression, wars of choice, reckless wars against countries that don't pose a threat to us. I'm defending the just war theory of Christianity and the constitutional system that the framers laid out. If we do have to go to war, there should be a vote in Congress.
Okay, so here's my question. To every American that's watching that has lost a loved one at the hands of Iran, you're now telling them when they go to their graves on Memorial Day that Iran was not a threat to the United States of America.
See, again, like going to sit there and to say you're disrespecting the veterans by saying that they're not a threat, right? They're a threat because you were there interfering, bombing, killing, right? If they kill you back while you are there, who's the dumb one for being there? Like, I know that you don't want to victim blame, and I never wish the deaths of American servicemen, the same that I don't want unnecessary deaths of anyone on this planet. But I think it is so dumb to just sort of say, well, you know, they killed them because Iran was a threat. No, they killed them because they were there in a war that they didn't need to be in. The whole reason that they went into Iraq, where they went toe-to-toe with the Iranians last time, was all based on a horseshit lie that has since been exposed and universally agreed upon, that everyone was lied to about the reasons we went into Iraq, right? That is a war that should never have happened. If the American servicemen that died at the hands of Iranian militants that participated in that conflict, I'm not sure if you might be referring to something earlier, like maybe in the Contra era or the embassy crisis, maybe, I'm not sure. Whichever one, doesn't really matter. If they weren't there, they would not be dead. Yes, the Iranians killed them. Again, I'm not fighting for them as the good guys in this argument, but the reality is, Mr. Miyagi, no be there.
As you just described it, and who gives a crap that those American soldiers were killed at the hands of Iran and the terrorist regimes that they aid, sponsor, support, and give free passage to?
Here's a good rule of thumb here, Ben. If I didn't say it and then you just say you're saying it, no, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we're going to say, no, I literally didn't say any of that. Yes, that's right. That part I said. Correct.
So
Iran
to the American families,
to the United States of America.
To the American families who've lost loved ones in a
Conflation
uniform,
argument,
who were killed
so
at the hands
dumb.
of the Iranians and their terrorist proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah and ISIS and others they gave safe passage to. You're telling me that Iran was not involved in the murder of those American soldiers. They killed more American soldiers than any other regime in the world.
Ben, I'm sorry. I know I'm a fraud and I don't know a lot about foreign policy. Did you just say that ISIS is an Iranian proxy?
I said that they knew that ISIS was given safe passage to cross through at some points in the past. Yes, that's a fact.
They're a proxy of the Iranians.
I said proxies and
no, actually, I don't think he said they're a proxy. I think they said safe passage. But even still, like,
asking the simple question:
how did ISIS get to power?
If you are American and your loved one was killed at the hands of the Iranian regime and their terrorist proxies, you're telling me, and you want to look at those families in the face and say, Iran is not a threat to the United States of America or our soldiers, even though their loved one died at the hands.
They're a threat to them while they are involved in military actions against those outfits in the Middle East. That would be a true statement. Anything beyond that is conflationary bullshit.
Of the Iranian regime.
Okay, all I ask is that you allow me to answer that question since you've asked it now. Is that cool?
It's a yes or no, but go.
It's not a yes or no. I'll give you the answer. My answer to all of those families would be, if you had listened to people like me, people like Ron Paul, people like Pat Buchanan, our troops never would have been in Lebanon or in Iraq to begin with, and your loved ones would still be with you. But instead, you listen to the foreign policy of people like you, Ben, and that's why we were involved in those conflicts to begin with. Iran poses no threat to the United States of America, meaning the middle part of North America. Does Iran pose a threat to our ability to occupy Iraq? Well, actually, we were kind of on the side of the most Iran-linked militia groups at the time. But yeah, there was some fighting with some Shiites in there too. It was another disastrous war that Piers Morgan was correct to oppose. And none of those boys would have been killed if they had listened to people like Piers.
Clever.
So Piers, let's be clear. Dave Smith's foreign policy is the only foreign policy in the world where American troops would never be killed. Glad we summed that up. Like, everybody go home.
No, if you're talking about the ones in Iraq, you just strawman every single thing I say and then claim
Ferguson
I said something.
No, because
you have Americans that died at the hands of the Iranians.
Now it devolves the Piers Morgan special.
One thing, let me just jump in. One thing's for sure, there will be more rewinding of this debate than in the history of Piers Morgan Uncensored. There's going to be frantic rewiring every time one of you says, I didn't say that. There's going to be a million people.
Now, let's be honest. The only thing that's had more rewinding than stuff like this was like VHS back in my era of the pre-internet days, where it's like, oh, I heard in this video there's boobs in it, right? That's the most paused and rewinded scenes in history. So come on now.
People going,
get a counter and put it on social media. I'll win that.
You're not going to win this debate so far,
Jake. Uncensored YouTube channel.
You're going to have a big comeback at the end if he's got any hope here.
Before we finish, I want to just bring up the fascinating kind of split that's going on the Republican side about this war. It's been bubbling away on other issues, but now it's really exploded here, Ben. And I want to play a clip, the clip from Tucker Carlson that he really delivered the most astonishing rebuke directly to
Is
Donald
this the
Trump.
Easter Sunday one?
No, this is a mockery not just of Islam, it's a mockery of Christianity.
Yeah.
To send out a tweet with the F word on Easter morning promising the murder of civilians and then saying praise be to Allah without explaining any of it, you are
I have to say that, like, the Tucker Carlson has said some incredibly offensive stuff over the years. So they go, and he used the F word on Easter morning when my kids were off looking for eggs by Cadbury, and he uses the F word? What are we doing? Like, it's hilarious that, like, that's the offensive part. The religious thing, okay, that is fair. Like, to on Easter Sunday to make a mockery of that day as someone who proclaims to be a Christian, I do get that. To then use the Allah thing at the end, it is hard to feel like he's not taking the piss out of it. Tucker's got a point, but then they use the F word. That part really tickles me about the offense. I don't know why.
Me and every other Christian because we're Christians. We can't support that. That is evil. That is an intentional desecration of beauty and truth, which is the definition of evil.
Now, I can remember a time, Ben Ferguson, when you would probably wholeheartedly endorse that statement.
Ooh.
But you can't now because you do a podcast with Ted Cruz.
Where does he go?
Tucker says he's evil.
Is that where he comes from? He does something with Ted Cruz? Ew.
I logically agree with him. I've never heard you use the F word on air. I don't think you would, right? I think you would agree that on Easter Sunday, saying what Trump
I'm
said
not going
would
to be that guy, by the way.
Outrageous and disgraceful. But I'm not sure you're going to say it now, are you?
Now, I will tell you exactly why I think the president put out that tweet.
But he said FAFO like 3 times.
The Iranian regime is. He was really angry.
Sorry, for accuracy, he said it 2 times. I don't want him going, no, I didn't do it 3 times. I did it 2 times.
And upset that they went after 2 of our pilots and he had to work so hard to get them back and put other people's lives at risk. He's in the Situation Room. He's seeing what's happening. He's watching how tough that was. He's also really pissed off that you had a leak, that there was a second pilot down that came from the U.S. that then put his life in danger. And if I was the president of the United States of America, Piers, in that moment, I'd probably drop an F-bomb too if we're being intellectually honest.
Why don't you repeat right now exactly what he said?
I'm not one to drop F-bomb just to drop F-bombs on TV. Like that's not who I am.
Let me start it and you finish it.
That's not my guy.
No, you know what? You wouldn't say it, Ben. You wouldn't say it because you know.
I have said
when I was in a shooting, I said it. And you certainly wouldn't have said it on Easter Sunday.
Piers, when I was in a shooting and I was the target of a gang initiation, and when I came home, you better believe I dropped the F-bomb for the very first time in front of my parents.
The very first time.
I don't know.
I'm going to Google that story.
I've never heard you do it on air.
I said it in
This is a super silly thing to be arguing about during an Iran war debate. It's just like, no, I wouldn't say the F word. My goodness. My goodness. This has become very British now, I think about it. It's like, my goodness. And then he said the F word. Can you believe this? Can you believe the absolute twattery of this? He used the F word on Easter Sunday, no less. My goodness. I demand satisfaction with a duel immediately.
Banged the gavel and said you can't say that in court. If I'm the president of the United States of America in that moment and I'm trying to get Americans back, I would hope the F-bomb would bubble up in your mind a little bit. I really do. I mean, he cares.
What else? I mean, how many strikes were done on Easter Sunday? Like, the most offensive thing that happened to that day is that they used anti-religious language and said an F-bomb. I don't know, it might sound like I'm defending Trump here, but like the level of outrage here, and then he said the F word. I get it. He's the leader of the free world, right? But 1, it's not surprising because it's Trump. And then 2, people died that day and probably in a pretty significant number. Like, can we pick maybe the better thing to be offended by, please?
Can I just
say, he cares about the people he's trying to go get.
Listen, by the way, it's just such a juxtaposition here, like the irony that I'm just kind of like the shit-talking comedian and Ben's the suit and tie conservative guy.
There you go.
And who Ben, when he was supporting Ted Cruz in the 2016 primary, would have been just like all the other conservatives saying like, Donald Trump is too vulgar and unserious and all of this stuff. And I'm telling you as me, someone who will drop F-bombs on almost every podcast that I'm on. It's not even just a matter of will you say the word. Great. It's not a matter of will you say the word. The president of of the United States of America on Easter while he's talking about a war that innocent people are dying in and then mocking Allah? I'm sorry, man. And I know, Ben, you're boxed in to just not say the obvious.
It's not
it
boxed
is disgusting.
in. I gave you my explanation why I think you said it.
It's an embarrassment. No, you just took a little shot at me.
You just don't like the explanation. The president just got back 2 American soldiers.
Dave's trying to get a viral moment.
See, I think to me, Ben, there's a middle.
He got him shot down.
To me, Ben, there's a middle ground. You don't have to go full Tucker.
Hold on, did you just accuse Donald Trump of getting 2 pilots shot down?
Yes, by
yeah, I mean, they were there.
Okay, here.
All of the death is on him.
This is why people, Dave, think you're an asshole. For that exactly.
No, it's accurate.
What do you mean people think this?
You don't blame terrorists. You don't blame terrorists when they do things. You only blame the United States of America, which goes back to the point. I genuinely think you probably hate America. Or you hate Donald Trump so much that you hate America by default. Like, you just blame the president for terrorists going after our guys.
Sure.
That's when they say you hate America. You actually hate America.
This is crazy.
Hey, Ben, let me ask you a question. Let's say that our government did become something that you would consider a terrorist regime. Let's say like real Nazis took over the United States of America, okay? Hypothetically, thought experiment. And they started doing Nazi stuff. They were really terrorists, whatever you would define that to be, which you never really define it.
Well, I'm in favor of the Second Amendment. I'm tracking with
Let's say, me too. Okay, so let's say they real terrorists take over the American government, and now the government's doing real terrorist stuff.
Where's he going?
If I were to call them terrorists, does that mean I hate America?
I think you're calling the American government a terrorist organization with facts. If
he is calling him that with facts.
That's with evidence.
Okay, so the debate.
That's with evidence.
Right.
Yeah.
You're not. There's no evidence here on what you just claimed that Donald Trump got them shot down. That's completely.
He did, because he sent them to war, right? You can't argue with this. He got them killed because they were there. If he tried to handle this in a different way, whether he went down a political road or like tried to seek a consensus of the world to try and control this if there actually is a problem in the Middle East, which it doesn't seem like there was at this particular point in time, outside of obviously another country wanted to get this kickstarted. Factually, it's just dumb to argue against this. I do not understand why you would go on an internationally viewed YouTube video like this and make a statement so dumb.
Different
Donald
than
Trump
Nazis.
launched
You should be intellectually honest enough to have that. No, those are two very different things.
Intellectual honesty is hilarious.
Is that what you're saying? Is Donald Trump a Nazi? Is that what you're saying?
No.
Oh, God. Gonna conflate it one step higher. Now you're saying he's a Nazi. My God.
Well, Donald Trump's the reason why they got shut down. Let's blame Donald Trump. I think that's American.
Let's.
I think the president trying to keep us safe is pro-America. And I think the president going after a terrorist regime is always a good thing.
Again, I'll take the people with IQs above 90 who understand the logical analogy I was just making. But Ben,
when you're losing an argument when you have to go after my IQ, which is above that,
keep
by the way.
interrupting.
But like,
okay,
come on.
Okay,
I hate it when it gets all this petty. Stay on the points, boys.
To the IQ of the
above
people
a 90,
who
you were
would
implying
believe
that
your
below
argument.
90. I can figure that out because I have above a 90 IQ, bro.
No, actually, you can't, because
what
I'm implying that only people with a 90 IQ would believe your line of bullshit. Nothing about your IQ was implied there, actually. But anyway, you want to say this is why the people think I'm an asshole? Okay, again, like I said with Adam,
sometimes he is, for sure.
Let's see what the response from the people is. This is why the people think you debate in a really dishonest way.
Okay,
that's true.
Let's see what people think more. That's the idea here.
That is a perfect way to end, because we'll let.
Well, there we go. I think that Benny Boy got absolutely torched in that one. And I think that the point there at the end is probably the best one. That there is so much intellectual dishonesty from the way that he was trying to come across. Like, to conflate everything. So what you're saying is that he's a Nazi. Or so what you're saying is that you hate America. You know what I mean? It's like South Park has done this. So, oh, I thought this was America. I thought this was America, right? It is so dumb. It is so frustrating to watch these things go down, because they can't argue the specifics of the points, because if they have to debate it on the facts, people are very much going to go, well, hang on a minute. Are we the baddies? Like that skit done by, I can't remember those two British comedians, but I see the little dude all the time on like 8 out of 10 Cats and stuff. David something, I think, where they're the Nazis in the trenches going, do you think we're the baddies? And I think that's the point. They get so scared of having to look into that mirror that they have to throw up this Batman-style smoke screen and go, and I'm gone. And just hiding behind a table, hoping no one sees them, you know? It's pretty nuts. So, look, I think that he got absolutely lit up in this. I think Dave made so many good points that you know, you don't die in this conflict, and Iran as Americans is not probably going to be a threat to you 9 days out of 10 or 9.99999 days out of 10, really, if we go by the facts and figures. They're not going to be a threat to you if you're not there in the Middle East bombing the shit out of them, right? And I think if you want to preserve American lives, do not build a framework and a history that means that you have a whole section of the world that hates you because of your interactions and the way that you have killed civilians there with no apologies. You have set countries on fire and then walked away, Afghanistan, Libya, and just said, you're on your own now. We got rid of the bad guys. You're welcome. Rebuild now. Bye. That doesn't build and foster love for you and your country, right? When you leave a wake of destruction, what you build is the next generation that hates you. You build the future terrorists that are going to eventually bring that war to your soil. That is a threat that is being created by the decisions of American leadership in the years gone by. So if you don't want those years to be repeated, you need to be the ones to break the cycle and figure out a better way. This doesn't seem like the breaking of a cycle. It seems like the start of an insane new one. Like, no one can argue that the way that this war is played out in the shortest period of time is going to be one of the most impactful one way or the other. Either we get to a new framework where Iran is about to become a regional power because Trump is going to have to give them so many concessions, like sanctions going away, them being able to control the Strait of Hormuz, and all they need to do is agree to stay below a certain threshold of nukes, and Trump gets to sell a win to the Americans. Okay. What about the Iranian people that you cared about, the ones that are being oppressed? They're still going to be what they were yesterday. What about the Gulf nations that are now absolutely trashed, and you are now going to set up a more powerful and prosperous Iran, right? If he gives them everything that they want, which he's going to have to give them a lot, it's going to be insane. And then there's the bigger question, really, and I don't think any of this gets resolved until we come back to this core issue, which is Palestine and Gaza. And I know you're probably going, oh, I'm sick of hearing about Palestine and Gaza. I mean, I hope you're not, because it's not like it stopped, right? Everyone's just talking about new countries now. They're still being devastated. The West Bank has had more settler violence and more deaths and more attacks on Palestinian nationals there in the last month, really, while this has been going on, while the rest of the world is eyes elsewhere. They're feeling emboldened. They're feeling justified to commit even more severe acts of violence in the West Bank. Until that gets resolved, right? Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, all of these proxies of Iran have still got the same justification for their existence. If we did not have Israel and the IDF being a huge threat to our countries and oppressing our people, we wouldn't need to do this, right? That's how they keep making this argument, right? And how the world now is kind of not making them the good guys, but you have more people than ever before going, well, they're a reactionary force, right? That they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that. I think that there is some truth there, right? That if Palestine was able to exist as its own nation, and that there was a respected border that Israel and Palestine agreed to hold to, and remember, those borders have been breached more by the Israelis than the other side, if we look back at history so far, that if settlements were fully made to not be able to expand and were enforced not just by the IDF, but by a worldwide coalition, a Gulf-wide coalition for both sides, I would wonder what that timeline would look like. Would there be no Hamas? Would there be no Houthis? Would there be no Hezbollah if all of a sudden those nations were freed? Houthis is different, I guess, because Yemen has its own thing going on to an extent. But certainly Hezbollah, absolutely. If Lebanon was safe, if Palestine was quote unquote free, right, is that basically Israel had their protected land where they do have a right to exist, but so do the Palestinians. And the fact that they've been denied being able to set up their own power structure by the Israelis is kind of why we are where we are. So I think that they can negotiate all they want in Iran, but I do think that if they don't go beyond that and force the IDF and Israel to make some concessions about what happens with the future of that, we're going to end up back here in some format eventually. So we're at a very, very huge we're at a very tumultuous period of history that we're about to slingshot into change one way or another. Now, will it be long lasting because they actually look at getting to the core issues that have been underneath this conflict? Or are we going to put a Band-Aid on it yet again? But the Band-Aid in this case means that Iran becomes a regional power and that the traditional power structure within the Middle East shifts. And you've only got now, again, Israel and Iran. And Israel's long-term prosperity, I think, is really going to be defined by the tolerance of the rest of the world. And the rest of the world has really started to look at them in a very negative fashion. If you poll any country on the planet, they are looking more and more negatively on them because they continuously appear as the aggressor, right? They continuously commit acts of genocide or acts of terror on far greater scale and far greater numbers. It is not to deny that October 7th happened. Of course it did. It was evil. It was abhorrent. Those civilians were killed and kidnapped by the hands of terrorists. But then the response to that was to inflict terror and death and destruction and rape and torture. And yes, all of those things have happened on a far greater scale. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see where the ceasefire goes with these conversations over the next 48 hours. I'm sure I'm going to be back talking about that. But what do you guys think of this debate and the points that were made by both sides? Do you think that Ben Ferguson had some good points? Do you think he was being very conflationary like I do? I don't even necessarily think Dave did a lot to win this debate. I think he just was relatively calm, level-headed. And I don't think he introduced a lot of like rock star, oh my God, boom moments. He just made logical common sense to me. So what do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please reach out to me in the comments or on the socials. I'm everywhere at Chewbagger84. And look, if you did enjoy this reaction video, let me know whether or not I should do some more of these things in the future, or whether you prefer my other format. And again, if you could do me a massive favor and hit that like, that subscribe, the bell, all those beautiful things that help me expand this channel as I go. I would really appreciate it. I hope you all have a great day, and I hope you all come back and join me on the next one. Cheers.